Welcome back. So while things are looking at least a little more promising than they did a few days ago, there's still no guarantees that we're going to avoid the debt limit default. And joining us now to explain why defaulting on the debt limit is not a good thing, would not improve the economy, as some will tell you, is Christian Dorsey, Director of External and Governmental Affairs at the Economic Policy Institute. Christian, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So do me and our audience a favor here. I'm going to read just some quotes here from some folks who believe that this is much ado about nothing here, going over the debt limit. And you do a little rhetoric versus reality for me, okay? And I'm going to start off with the first argument, which comes from Congressman Yoho. I'll editorially say, I think, appropriately named, saying that not only is this not a big deal, in some ways it might help. His exact quote was, "Not raising the debt ceiling would bring stability to the world markets." True or false?
Absolute false. The reality is this would bring chaos to the world market, because all of a sudden you'd have, first of all, investors in Wall Street who would flee by the dozens. We'd see catastrophic losses in equities, which would lead to massive job loss right away. This would also throw into turmoil whether or not the United States, which right now is the stabilizing force in world currency, whether it should continue to be so, and that would drive up interest rates dramatically, making the cost of our debt all the more expensive and depressing demand, because much of what Americans can consume today comes from buying it on credit, and that would totally eliminate their ability to do so to the levels that they have. So this would be a big deal in every stretch of the word, not only for the world, but also at home in your own personal finances.
Second thing is prioritization, a term people have been hearing, that basically you can pick and choose what to pay. This gem coming from Joe Barton, another Republican congressman, who said, well, we have in my household a budget, some bills that have to be paid and some bills that only are getting paid partially. The argument being, hey, all this fear here that come later October that these bills all come due, we got enough in the till, we can pay some and we can basically put some on layaway. True or false?
Reality is that the president doesn't have any authority to decide which bills get paid when. The Treasury is bound to pay dues when they come due. There's no ability on the part of anyone in government to pick who gets paid over someone else. And beyond that, Richard, if you look at the Constitution, the fourth section of the 14th Amendment, it says that the public debt of the United States, its validity ought not be questioned. Therefore, there really is a question as to whether or not Congress has any ability at all not to, by not extending the debt ceiling, whether or not they have a legal authority to prevent the president from paying bills as they come due.
The next one about the actual existence of a debt limit. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm reading these quotes here verbatim because these are the arguments that you hear. And this one from Tom Coburn, Republican senator from Oklahoma, who says, there's no such thing as a debt ceiling in this country because it's never been not increased, and that's why we're $17 trillion in debt. And I would dispel the rumor that's going around that you hear on the news that if you don't raise the debt ceiling, we'll default on our debt. We won't. We'll pay interest, we'll redeem our bonds. Basically, no problem here, keep moving on. Do we have a real thing called a debt limit in this country?
We do, and we are unique in the world in doing so. Most other civilized or not so civilized places realize that when you legally obligate yourselves to pay for things, that the debt that will incur is something that you pay as well. So we're very unique in that we have a two-step process where we have a Congress that can say, let's buy it, and then later on, shall we pay for it or shall we not? That's certainly a very unusual thing. And the fact that Congress has always up until this point paid its bills doesn't obviate the fact that this is a real crisis. If it chooses not to do so this time, it has real consequences.
And could you just please dispel the idea that people are looking on the calendar, well, it's not really the 17th, it's the 22nd. The markets don't work that way. If they read here,
that's right.
We go back 2 years ago, Christian, if you couldn't tell everybody just what happened with the very threat of it, let alone the idea of going over in 2011.
That's right. Yeah, we saw in 2011, we saw about $2 billion sucked out of the economy in terms of, fears on Wall Street and elsewhere that we were actually going to reach the date. The important thing here is the date. Whether or not that is the actual date that the funds don't line up is largely irrelevant. If we get to the point where we cross the 17th, it will be a signal to the world that the United States no longer has its act together. It'll be a signal that no longer can you look to the United States to be the stabilizing and leading force in the global economy. Trust me, Richard, if you pass that date, catastrophic consequences follow, regardless of whether or not the actual day where the funds are out of balance doesn't occur until a few days later. The Treasury has never been exactly precise about when that minute is going to hit, but we know that once we've crossed the 17th, we've crossed the period at which our politics have failed, and there are going to be global economic consequences as a result.
Christian, Mr. Dorsey, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you. Hopefully you yourself have spread a little bit of sunshine here into this very confusing or not so confusing subject. Thank you again.
Thank you, Richard.
And you know, guys, I think at least, Andrew, the defenders of this premise that the debt limit default wouldn't hurt or that it's not real, I think that exasperated this as much as the shutdown or anything else, that things that people just took as fact, even on that they started debating. Even if it was just the fringe of the Tea Party, the fact that the Republicans had to almost explain it away, and that was like the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people.
From moderate, middle-of-the-road friends of ours who, I'm not going to name names, but appeared on the show. And it kills me because for so long the focus has been jobs in the economy. Where are the jobs and why aren't you doing anything to fix the economy? This will hurt both. But it just seems so cavalier
Richard, though,
to play with.
I know you know that this is real. I think this is the heart of the question right now. How hard is it for a Republican to publicly go against a Republican? I know a lot of people who are close to this in D.C. have been really surprised in the last week that Republicans won't put their names. There's blind quotes when they'll go after. Sure, it's Sununu and there's, but he's not running for anything right now, and he's not elected. So sure, Karl Rove can do an editorial talking about how stupid there are, Crowdhammer, conservative leading voices, but a sitting Republican in Washington hasn't called him out yet. And to me, until that happens, other than John McCain, you're not going to break the fever. Are you surprised a little bit more Republicans haven't done it?
McCain is different. He's in the Senate. The Senate operates differently than the House. But then again, you remember the 11th. You may remember the 11th commandment, which comes from Ronald Reagan, which is
Republicans remember?
Yeah,
they absolutely do, and that's why they're not talking. That's why they're not
the Tea Party.
But they're not talking bad about each other because you have to work with each other.
Okay,
so why would I talk bad about
you?
I've got to work with you.
Remember that conference where this came to a head? Ted Cruz is sitting in a room, closed doors, with a bunch of Republican senators, and they say to him, listen, we're not signing on for this. This thing's stupid. We can't win this fight. But you promise us at least, Ted, that you're not going to run against us, run people against us in our primaries if we don't sign on for this. I won't make that promise, he said. And then all hell broke loose in terms of nobody's going to back him up. So to me, the Tea Party forgot the 11th commandment. They primary these guys, good loyal Republicans, and we can name, chapter and verse who don't have jobs right now because, Dick Lugar, a legend, he loses some nut job. I can go through the line.
But Ronald Reagan.
They would have.
Well,
no, they would have.
Again, the 11th commandment is Republicans should not talk bad about
another
Republican. I hope not. He's still a legend. And again, a Ronald Reagan type leadership would move people towards consensus, and that's what really needs to happen. The president, the Senate Majority Leader.
I agree, and I'm not trying to put you in the spot, but it is an opportunity. Okay,
come on, stop.
Let me try and say it differently. Don't you think it's an opportunity now where you don't have a major election season for Republicans to kind of figure out if we want to hold the House and we want to get the Senate and the elections and figuring out who's the best chance to win in 16, they got to use these next 6 months to figure out what the message is and the strategy.
But remember, John Boehner has said, I want to talk to the president. As the president says, I do not want to negotiate. John Boehner has recently offered and said, listen, we will keep the government going.
You know what? You would have had a shot, don't you think, Dominic? They could have played that strategy and maybe even won if they came with an idea of, we're not going to shut the government down, and I'll even not screw around with the debt limit because I'll put America first. But you have to promise me if I do this publicly, Mr. President, you'll give me a time and a date where we're going to sit down and go over all these things. He was never going to win this fight.
Richard, they were never going to do that. They want to shut the government down. There's no rationale. There's no reason. They want to see this president fail. and they want to shut the government down.
Republicans
Period.
need the Tea Party still more than the Tea Party needs Republicans. Republicans can't win the House without the Tea Party Republicans of the South and the West.
Here's why I disagree with you. In every of the 40, 60, 70, whatever seats we're giving credit to the Tea Party for, a Democrat can't win there.
That's right.
The way a moderate Republican or even a regular conservative Republican will win those seats. A Democrat doesn't win. You don't need Tea
But
Party.
not against the Tea Party. The Tea Party, they can't
We'll
shake
see.
the Tea
You got
Party.
business interests now saying they may run somebody against it. All right. When we come back, Dominic's going to share his one-on-one with the mayor's life, former Mayor David Dinkins. He's going to share insights from his new book that he's got out that he's saying a lot of things on, including sounding off on the current mayoral race. Stay with us. We'll be right back.